So in recent days, we've been posting our night gallery reviews because I feel in the fall and winter of the year, that's the best time to watch night gallery. A lot of like nighttime horror or after midnight horror. Now, a recent follower of the channel, John Walco, is making some good, or Whalco, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, John, making some good requests in relation to some of the key episodes we haven't talked about before. Now, this one features two of the most underrated actors in Hollywood history, the great Jill Ireland, who we lost to sickness much too early, the wife of the great Charles Bronson, and of course Richard Kiley, best known for the Escape episode from the Night Gallery pilot movie. Now, this episode is the closest you're going to get probably to Night Gallery being Tales of the Unexpected, or like the old-fashioned DC comic books, like the extended 28-page version of a story. Of course, we're going to be talking about the Ghost of Sorworth Place. Now, in this one, Richard Kiley understandably becomes smitten with Jill Ireland's character and vows to protect her from the ghost of the place, of Sorworth Place. Now, this was the second part of the Camafeo episode, and it's kind of like a throwback to the old kind of 1940s, 50s British horror. And if you ever seen it, Russell Kirk wrote the story with a teleplay by the great Alan Sapinsley. Now, it was directed by Ralph Sineski with, again, Richard Kiley as a lead, Ralph Burke, Jill Ireland as Anne Loring, Mavis Neal Palmer as Mrs. Ducker, Patrick O'Moore as Mr. McLeod, and John D. Schofield as Alistair Loring. Now, for this podcast, we're quoting from the great David Jewell WordPress, who broke down many of the episodes in 2014, his great blog. Check it out at davidjewell.wordpress.com. Now, in Jewell's review, or talking about the episode, the second half of this Night Gallery episode is also set in the UK, this time in Scotland, where middle-aged American Ralph Burke, played by Kiley, seemingly on a long soul-searching holiday, gets lost while hiking through a forest. He comes upon an impressive old manor, and with nightfall approaching, knocks at the door, hoping to find directions to a nearby place to stay. Not an original trope, but it works in this episode. Now, Mrs. Ducker, played by Mavis Neal Palmer, the manor's unwelcome housekeeper, answers the door and tries to get rid of Burke, but the lady house, the beautiful Anne, again played by Ireland, very underrated actress, and she uses her beauty to great force in here, intercedes and gives them directions to a local inn. In the morning, the hotel manager, Mr. McLeod, again played by Patrick O'Moore, assumes that Anne is a friend of Burke's as she stopped by the previous evening to see him, and failing that, left him a note. Barely concealing his glee, as he was clearly attracted to Anne upon meeting her at the manor, he reads the note, which is an invitation to meet her for tea at Sorworth Place at 4:30 p.m. Now, McLeod explains to Burke that Anne is a widow, her husband having died about a year ago, although he's reticent to give Burke the cause of death. Offering Burke a drink at the hotel bar, McLeod says, without acknowledging the irony of the two men sharing a drink so early in the day, that it was the drink that destroyed Anne's first husband, but it was also the evil. Now, we speculate what evil might be. According to the information he's provided, seems that he slept with the manor's chambermaids and Betty's wife. McLeod wonders why Anne still stays at Sorworth Place when she could have the pick of the countryside, obviously because of her natural beauty. Burke wonders what brought him there. At tea, Anne says her housekeeper thinks that Anne killed her husband, but suddenly a window blows open and Anne asks Burke to close it. He does, but as he looks out, he briefly sees a man standing near a tree. Then, after closing it, he sees the man walking through the hallway, but he's not sure if he really saw the man or his mind was playing tricks on him. Later, Mrs. Ducker approaches Burke and warns him, saying that at night she sees the late Mr. Loring at the bottom of the stairs, dressed the same way that Burke has seen the man. This unsettling experience is why housekeeper Ducker always makes sure to leave work before nightfall. Good idea with a haunted house. Now, Anne tells Burke that when she saw him the first time, a voice told her that he is the person to protect her from her husband, and she explains what happened on the night of his death. Evidently, she poured the medicine her husband was dependent on down the drain, probably a warfarin, substitute or blood thinner. She knew he was sleeping with the servants besides. Their own relationship had become cold, and she rebuffed these attempts at marital relations with her, which resulted in beatings. When he was at that store at the bottom of the stairs, he warned her that he would be back in exactly 1 year, which would have been their second wedding anniversary. Now, Burke then agrees that he will prevent the ghost of Mr. Loring from doing her harm that night, but Anne adds that Burke shouldn't expect anything romantic out of the deal, as she says that her husband sapped all ability to love living things out of her. Undeterred, Burke accepts these terms. Well, for a potential, as we say. But it spins like this. He does all he can to secure the house after Anne goes upstairs to bed. Then Anne comes back downstairs and fiddles with one of the doors, and Burke sends her back up to bed. Then, for some reason, he goes outside, and when he does, he sees Loring's ghost enter the house via the door that Anne unlocked, apparently to let him in. Now, Burke runs inside and sees Ghost Loring climbing the stairs. He runs after and finds the ghost inside Anne's bedroom. The two duke it out, and we see a smile of satisfaction on Anne's face to find the two fighting over her. When Ghost Loring is at the top of the stairs, Burke leaps at him, but the spectre vanishes, causing Burke to take a nasty fall down the staircase, accompanied by blood-curdling screams. Now, Anne, clad in just her bedsheet, which was very controversial, I'll tell you why in a second, looking quite dead himself and transformed in personality only. When Anne invites Burke to share her bed, he snarls, In a year I'll come for you, my Anne." A good chilling finish, according to Jewel, to a solid segment. So at the end, we don't know if it's Burke or the ghost of Anne's combination. So we really don't know. It's open-ended. But I tell you what happened. The Jill Ireland character was clad in almost like a naked under a bed sheet, or like what's called a bed linen or whatever. Was very controversial to my memory. That scene was cut for Canadian broadcast, and I tell you why. According to broadcast standards, showing someone half naked on a Canadian show had to be shown after a certain time period. Now, to my knowledge, I think it was shown 8 o'clock in the Maritime's first run, and 8 o'clock was not the PG-13, it was still the children's hour. So, depending where you watch the episode, and maybe Ontario or Quebec, you'll probably see Jill Ireland in the bedsheet, but I think in the Canadian version, maybe for international distribution, she's kind of cut off. But you see the photo there, she's very fetching. And Jill Ireland, you see what she did to Mr. Spock in the Star Trek episode. She's always been a creature of beautiful intelligence, and Charles Bronson once said she was the most beautiful person inside and out that he had ever known. And Charles Bronson was a better person. He said that many times, having been with her all those years. But Jill Ireland, for me, pound for pound, one of the most underrated female actresses, because she could do with a glance what some actresses would take 10 minutes off the page to do. And you see in this episode, now there's not much parallels between her Star Trek appearance, where she played part of a collective that were being had joy by spores on this planet, and Spock becomes infected with the spores, and they had a previous relationship, the Jill Ireland character on the show and Spock. But we got to understand that Richard Kiley, my God, Richard Kiley can outact anybody, one of the most decorated and respected actors of his generation. Again, most of the one of the most underrated, should have won like dozens of Emmys, just like Peter Strauss, just like Nick Nolte on the small screen could do something with a script that couldn't be done. It didn't seem like a Night Gallery episode. If it looked like anything, it should have been a telemovie. I would like to see a 90-minute version of this. And Kiley owes a lot to Jonathan Frid in his acting style in this. Jonathan Frid, Barnabas Collins from, of course, Dark Shadows. Because Jonathan and Richard Kiley, that's why I like Richard and Jonathan's style the best of that 1970s acting. Because he would take something so simple and make it complex, not only Shakespearean, but a method in not an overborne way. You look at Sins of the Fathers with Richard Thomas, where it was a little bit too over the top, but it was good enough and strong enough for it. But Richard Kiley in this episode, he's longing for something, but he doesn't really explain what he's longing for. And the Jill Ireland character, is she real? And some people in my friend's circle have speculated that she probably was a ghost besides, because she was taking a whole bunch of beatings. Could she have been a ghost and just an apparition when she needed to be in physical form and other times. But like I said, if you like UK style horror or the comic book horror, like Tales of an Unexpected, Ghosts, House of Mystery, this is up your alley. It's the most comic book horror version of Night Gallery of that big second season, as we like to say. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what we're doing here with our Night Gallery podcast, let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, watching Night Gallery has always been hit and miss, because you can see an episode like this, the Camafeo episode with this, where sometimes it has the Rod Serling style of, the big ending, but this was a slow build, and left open-ended. So if people are expecting a Rod Serling episode with every episode of Night Gallery, it was not to be there. But I would like to see this episode 60 minutes, 65, 70, a little bit more characters. It comes across like a play. I'd like to see a stage version of this too. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.